This program is brought to you by First National Bank of Botswana.
FNB, how can we help you?
Good evening and welcome to First Issues. May 2019 will go down in Africa's economic history as one of the most notable dates for the continent, as it marks the date on which the African Continental Free Trade Deal came into effect. Now, consequently, this means a single market of goods and services for 1.6 billion of Africa's people, with a gross domestic product of over $2.5 trillion. The deal was introduced to lower tariffs on goods imported and exported by the 52 out of 55 countries in Africa. The UN's trade body deduces that lowering intra-African tariffs through the agreement could bring $3.6 billion in welfare gains for the continent through a boost in production and cheaper goods. Before the implementation of the agreement, economic data points about Africa showed that trade within Africa was almost non-existent, at just 16% of total continental trade in 2014. The UN Economic Commission for Africa predicts that the deal has the potential to raise intra-African trade by up to 25% by 2040. Services could be expected to grow even faster across borders as more African startups gain traction, offering everything from fintech services to online education as they disrupt traditional sectors. Botswana joined other African states in signing the African Continental Free Trade Deal this year in March at the annual African Union Summit in Rwanda. The broader access to the continent means an increased market access for Botswana's exports, such as live animals, beef, salt, vaccines for veterinary medicine, minerals, and leather products. Joining us in the program is economist with eConsult, Dr. Keith Jefferies, who shares some of the observers' sentiments praising the move as a step in the right direction.
I think there's quite a lot of reasons. One is that the products, many African countries make similar products. And obviously trade is based more on countries having different products. So country A needs a product from country B and vice versa. So when production structures are very similar, say a lot of African economies are based around primary production, agriculture, mining, etc. There's less scope for trade. So that's number one. Number two is it's quite expensive and difficult to trade across borders. The transport costs are high, borders are difficult to get through, distances are long, and I think another related problem is, to be honest, there are too many countries. So every time you trade with a different country, there's a different set of rules and regulations, different set of customs procedures, etc., etc. Whereas, if you compare, say, China, with its 1.5 billion people, one country, one set of rules. Africa has similar number of people, but 54 countries, 54 sets of rules. So all that adds up to making trade more expensive and therefore more difficult.
Even with that, what does this new trade agreement mean for Botswana?
Well, I think it means that in principle, the potential market for our exports is larger and hopefully should be easier to access. So trade agreements usually cover two main aspects of trade. So one is tariffs. Obviously many countries impose tariffs on imports, and that adds to the cost of an exported product going into a foreign country. And these trade agreements have as their basis free trade, which means that tariffs on most items will be reduced. In fact, on most items, tariffs will be reduced to zero progressively. There may be some exceptions. Sometimes countries keep tariffs on what they call sensitive products, but in general, tariffs will be reduced to zero, and therefore that barrier to trade is reduced. So therefore reducing the cost of exported products. So that will help increase the market for Botswana's exports, which is absolutely crucial. And secondly, trade agreements also deal with what we call non-tariff barriers, which are all the other things that restrict trade. So that can be things like customs rules, regulatory issues, different standards, all the things that add to the costs and complexity of trading. And in many cases, trade agreements will have a commitment to reducing those non-tariff barriers, which also, actually personally, I think they're more of an impediment to trade than tariffs, and that's the most important element of these trade agreements.
It's a good thing that you brought up the issue of customs and the rules, because Africa has been known to have poor infrastructure and bureaucratic systems at the borders. Would those systems then not make this new deal just a dream and make implementation quite difficult, even impossible?
No, because as long as there's real commitment on all sides, these barriers can be reduced. So to give an example, in the SADC free trade area, there is agreement on single documentation, common documentation. So in SADC, for instance, there's something called the single administrative document. And that means that for goods that are being traded between members of the SADC free trade area, there's one document or one set of documents, and that document is accepted by all of the customs authorities as the basis for a consignment to move through the SADC free trade area. So, and that means that there's a single set of documents rather than 15 sets of documents for 15 different countries. And clearly that expedites trade. And that was introduced under the SADC free trade agreement. So as long as the agreement covers those things and there's a commitment by the members to actually do it, it can help. So another example, for instance, is something called one-stop border posts. And with a one-stop border post, I mean, normally when a truck goes through a border, if you think of Tlokeng, the truck coming from Botswana has to be cleared by BERS on the Botswana side, and then it stops again on the South African side to be cleared for entry into South Africa by SARS. Now, with a one-stop border post, the truck, as the name suggests, the truck stops once, and the two customs authorities will jointly clear the consignment. So that reduces the bureaucracy and increases the speed at which a truck can get through a border. So these one-stop border posts are usually also provided for under free trade agreements. So one of the positive developments with the Kazangula Bridge, which obviously is going to make trade a lot easier between Botswana and countries to the north, is that not only is there going to be a bridge, which means that trucks won't have to wait for the pontoon, there's going to be a one-stop border post between Botswana and Zambia. So all of that will help to expedite trade between Botswana and Zambia and other countries.
Mr. Jefferies, you spoke of, these deals, the lot of them, your ECOWAS, your even this one helping with lower tariffs. Yeah. But even with that, some African countries have been known to not pay other countries for what they've been supplied with. Case in point, Eskom has been complaining that some of its African countries have not been paying them. Would then this not mean that that situation would be experienced at a much larger scale?
I think it's not generally the case. I think the Eskom example is particularly with Zimbabwe. They've been selling a lot of power to Zimbabwe. And Zimbabwe, because of its ongoing economic crisis, has been unable to pay or very slow in paying. But it's not, I'm not sure if I think it's more of a exceptional case of countries that are in economic distress. And obviously Zimbabwe would be one, there might be others, but I don't think that's generally the rule. I mean, if you look, we in Botswana, we also buy power from Eskom, and I would be very surprised if Eskom have ever had a delayed payment from BPC. And I think that in general, payments these days are quite good. So most countries, they have floating exchange rates, they have relatively few foreign exchange restrictions, so if a trade payment is due, it's generally the payment is made. As I say, I think Zimbabwe is a special case. It's not just Eskom. I know trade between Botswana and Zimbabwe has really dried up, partly for that reason. I know of some companies that used to export to Zimbabwe, and they've just stopped because they say, yeah, there's a market, but we can't get our money.
What is the future of help? It's to help people find the great in themselves. The drive, the passion. Help them find their true potential. Help them stretch. Help them grow. That's why we help people help themselves, help the world, because a little help goes a long, long way. FNB, how can we help you?
Welcome back to First Issues. Financial literacy entails possessing a certain level of financial knowledge and applying that knowledge to day-to-day financial matters. Now, the basics of financial literacy seek to address various fundamental concepts about money that can lead to better financial management skills. Financial consultant Tumelo explains the basic fundamental concepts of financial literacy.
Financial literacy is basically having the knowledge and understanding of how money works, or being in tune with your personal finances, and most importantly, applying it. So it doesn't help just to know. It's very important to know and apply the information. But you know, what we've encountered or what we're realizing is our education system does not have personal finance. Even as far as university or tertiary level, we do not know or we are not taught on how to manage money. And there's a fundamental difference between, your business studies courses or your accounting. But it's only limited to corporate level. It does not address the personal aspect of managing our finances. So personal finance or financial literacy is the process of understanding, knowing, and being able to manage your finances. These days, the civic organizations that try to advance the mandate of financial literacy as a way of helping the current structures that exist, which would be ideally your financial institutions or financial providers. The mandate is such that they give people the right and adequate information as far as financial products are concerned or personal finances are concerned. But we also have professionals which we call financial consultants or financial planners. These are the right people that can help you, first with educating you, and secondly with actually helping you apply and take you through the process of financial freedom or making the right financial decisions. Over and above that, information is readily available because of the internet. We're fortunate to have access to your Google. You just find out on areas or topics that are of interest. Even when someone is selling you a product, you have that liberty or you have that alternative to search or ask someone about it before you commit to buying that particular product. So these days information is accessible. There are professionals who can help you through the process.
What is the future of help? It's to help people find the great in themselves. The drive, the passion. Help them find their true potential. Help them stretch. Help them grow. That's why we help people help themselves, help the world, because a little help goes a long, long way. FNB, how can we help you?
Welcome back to First Issues and to another installment of our Own Your Day, Own Your Life productivity segment. In our last episode, we learnt of some of the factors that have led to an increase in lifestyle diseases, all the way from poor lifestyle choices to a disintegration of the social community as a coping mechanism. Tonight, we learn from Dr. Kiran Bhagat which of these factors are within our control and how we can adapt to improve our lives.
All of them, are under our control if we think about it. If we just take eat better, okay? So eating better means eating whole food. It means eating food that is a whole fruit, for example, a whole apple, a whole orange, a whole banana, whole carrots, whole cucumbers, spinach, beetroot, beans, nuts. We're talking about whole foods. Processed foods means things like Kellogg's cornflakes, Weetabix, granola, muesli. These are processed in a factory. Eat whole foods, fresh food if you can, straight from the soil. The closer to the soil that you can eat, the healthier it is because it's untouched. Then the more natural it is, rather than trucked in across the border, out of season, in a freezer, irradiated to become ripe, which is what sometimes bananas are. They're shipped across, so we're not only increasing our carbon footprint by trucking foods that are out of season, that are imported from countries where it's in season but it's out of season here, you're not eating local. So eat local, eat from the soil. So we are talking about makomani, we're in winter and makomani is in season. We're talking about dinawa, we're talking about morojo, we're talking about lebelebele, we're talking about midi, kabu, korong. All these things are available and they are natural, they are whole foods. We're talking about the avoidance of additives. Some of the things that we add, for example, the classic one is aromat. People think that it hasn't any sugar, salt in it. It's got plenty of salt in it. We're talking about eating natural herbs, spicing your food with natural things. We're talking about natural oils, olive oil, coconut oil, clarified butter, which is called ghee and available in this country, macadamia and avocado oil. You don't need to cook in a lot of this stuff, but it's a natural oil. We're saying stay away from processed oils. We're talking about sunflower and safflower and soya oils. These are highly processed oils, and the chemistry involved to extract the oil from, for example, sunflower is so toxic that it may look golden on the counter, but the process of arriving at that oil has literally poisoned the body. So these processed oils should not be part of the diet. There should be natural oils, olive oil, coconut oil, butter, ghee, macadamia and avocado oil are natural oils to cook with. So we need to re-educate our public as to what they should be eating. We're trying to avoid blending foods. If you blend your vegetables into a smoothie, if you blend your fruit into a smoothie, it's got a lot of sugar in it. Eat it the way nature or the good Lord made it. Eat the whole fruit rather than the orange juice, because the juice is just sugar, whereas the orange has got murukku in it, it's got fiber in it, so it will reduce the absorption of the sugar in it. So that's eating well. Exercise means moving a little bit more. Move a little bit more, even in your workplace. Do a little bit of sprinting if you can, and do a little bit of light weights. So you get your muscle bulk, you get your bones strong, you get your cardiovascular system moving around, and on a day-to-day basis within your workspace, you're not just sitting the whole day. So that's moving better. Sleeping better means you want to avoid junk light. We want to avoid your cell phones after a certain time in the evening. You want to switch off your television or your Netflix or whatever it is you're doing at night that's poisoning your mind, that's not allowing you to sleep. You want a dark room. You want to make sure you're not taking too many stimulants that keep you awake all night, particularly alcohol, coffee, tea, etc. And you want to make sure that the bedroom is to be with your partner or is to sleep. It's not the television in the bedroom. It's not the computer in the bedroom. It needs to be a dark room, dark curtains so that you sleep well. Try and avoid sleeping tablets because often they don't work or they give you an hypnotic effect. We've talked about this before. What it does is it is the equivalent of taking a couple of beers. It knocks the front of your brain out but doesn't give you the natural cycles of sleep. And those sleep tablets are addictive, and we know that with time they become less and less effective. So avoid sleeping pills. And we talked about a community. We talked about the fact that you need to try and make sure that you have a family, eat together. You eat at a kitchen dining room table together. Fewer and fewer people eat in front of a television. If you eat in front of a television, you gain weight, because by the time you finished your plate of food, you've just been watching the television. So you tend to eat more when you're watching television rather than eat at a dining room where you're talking to each other, you're engaging conversation with each other. Invite granny and grandpa home every now and again. Take the children outdoors. develop that community spirit. So these are simple things you can have in your power to reduce the diseases that we have. And it may sound like a simple thing to do, but sometimes what is simple is not necessarily easy. You know, sometimes it's not easy to avoid these billboard signs that convince you to go and eat at a takeaway or a restaurant or a drive-through. You know, these horrendous things that have started in the country where you drive through and collect your package of poison. So these are things that we're trying to educate our public about, that can actually prevent some of the conditions that we see. Because, Sego, you know, we're looking at some of our children today, they're becoming overweight, they're becoming obese. You look at the tuck shops at which they take their breaks at school, you know, the things that are there being sold, and we are seeing conditions and diseases, for example, type 2 diabetes, which is an adult diabetes, we're seeing in younger and younger children because they're becoming more and more obese. And these are conditions we need to change at a very young age. You know, the WHO estimates, that this may be the first generation of children that will not live longer than their parents because of the conditions that they are getting as a result of the lives that they are living and the changes that are occurring in their bodies.
Join us again next week for another chat with our resident health expert as we talk about the end results of the disease illusion. Until then, enjoy the rest of your evening. Good night.
This program was brought to you by First National Bank of Botswana.
FNB, how can we help you?